Okay, folks, welcome back, everybody. You asked for it, you got it. I've actually never seen the oversimplified video about the Battle of Hastings. We did the video a couple of days ago about the Battle of Hastings, and a bunch of you said, okay, now you need to do the oversimplified. I didn't know there was one. I'm not sure how I didn't know there was one, but I didn't know there was one. So this is the oversimplified video to follow up to the one we just did about the Battle of Hastings. This is about the war that changed the English language. I've never seen it before. I'm curious to see how it may add to what we've already talked about, how it may have a different take on it. Let's dive right in. The link's in the description if you want to check out the original video. Here we go.
Was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community with over 17,000 classes in just about anything you can imagine. Keep watching until the end of the video to learn how you can get your first 2 months for free. England in the Middle Ages. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, the children are playing in the village square.
Wait, did we just get rickrolled? We got rickrolled. It said we're no strangers to love. Right over here.
The sun is shining, the birds are singing.
Yeah, we got rickrolled.
The children are playing in the village square. What a wonderful time to be
Not
alive.
really.
Hey, you're dying of dysentery.
Okay, I apologize. I don't want to pause this much right at the beginning. That's not how dysentery is spelled. That's neither here nor there. It has nothing to do with history. It does make me think of Oregon Trail, though, which was one of my favorite games as a kid.
And also we're being raided by Vikings. What an awful time to be alive.
Oh,
It's the year 900. Europe is a Viking's wet dream. Raids galore. Hey, you want to go raid Paris? Okay. That particular raid didn't go too well, but the King of the Franks said, you guys are pretty tough and scary. How about we give you land in northern France,
Normandy.
and in return, you protect us from other Vikings? And it was agreed. The Vikings set up the Duchy of Normandy, and then they went full-on French, converting to Christianity, learning the language, and making babies with the locals.
and that's actually where Norman, the word, comes from. It's the Northmen. It's the Vikings. And so it's kind of funny that, you know, when we think of the Norman conquest of England, we think of that as French. But really, Normandy was a Viking duchy. Rollo and Eystein and all these guys who were Vikings originally said, now obviously they married into French families and things like that. But yeah, it wasn't just a French invasion. It was a Viking invasion of England.
England also had its fair share of Viking problems. In the 800s, Danish Vikings had conquered most of the country, but the Anglo-Saxons eventually managed to kick them out, although they left behind a bunch of Viking settlers. Now this guy's king. He sucks. Replace him with his brother. And he was like, hey baby, how you doing? And had a son, and then turned around and was like, hey baby, how you doing? And had another son. And then he died and no one was sure which son to make king. This one, because he's older. Not if I have anything to do with it. That works for us too. Then he grew up and married the Duke of Normandy's daughter, and
So yeah, and I mentioned this briefly during the last video about Normandy. The Anglo-Saxon way of choosing kings was not simply who's the heir to the throne. There was a council called the Witan. And if you've ever seen the TV show on Netflix, which is fantastic, by the way, The Last Kingdom, you see a lot of this time period. You see the balance of power and the fighting going on between the various English kingdoms, including some that are ruled by the Danes, the Vikings. You also see that in the TV show Vikings. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily, okay, you died, your son takes over. You know, there's often a lot of fighting for that influence over the Witan, and a lot of times it didn't really go so well.
had a bunch of kids. Remember this one. He's important. Then his advisors came to him and said, hey man, all those Viking settlers that are living here, they might band together and kill you. Well then, why don't we kill them first?
Bad idea.
And so it was. This pissed off the Danish king, who launched an invasion, and the Vikings conquered England once again. Then the Anglo-Saxons unconquered it, then the Vikings reconquered it. The king's family had to go into exile, including Edward. Remember him? He went to Normandy where he lived for 30 years. He and his brother Alfred tried to return to England to retake the throne from the Vikings, but they were betrayed by the Earl of Wessex, who
Poor
said,
Alfred.
hey friend, I'll take you to London where all the nobles are waiting to make you king. Oh.
So, you know, and this is good because this is giving a lot more of the background than we saw in the video the other day about the Battle of Hastings. This is giving a lot more context to why things happened and what all built up to, and why William the Bastard, you know, had such a claim on the Kingdom of England. And here's Godwin, the Earl of Wessex, who we talked about Harold Godwinson, and he's the son, Godwin's son. Yeah, that's where that's kind of the naming pattern.
Oh no, look out, red hot poker in the eyes. I can't see. And thus you can't be king.
Legit what happened
back
too.
to Normandy. After a few more Viking kings came and went, one finally died without an heir, and Edward was called back to England where he became king. And that's where our story begins.
All pretty accurate.
Here's the thing about becoming a king in the Middle Ages. Often your entire country won't support you at first. You can be vulnerable to rebellions, and it's up to you to take control. Fortunately for Edward, there was already a super powerful guy who had a lot of control over England, and if Edward could get his support, then England would be his.
Godwin.
Who is this guy? Oh, piss, it's the guy who gave my brother the red hot poker in the eye. After an awkward moment where Edward exiled Godwin from the country, he eventually had to give in and let him keep his earldom, possibly after Godwin gave him a bunch of gold and said he was very, very sorry.
So Godwin is this incredibly powerful earl. We've talked about him yesterday, and of course his son as well. But didn't have the claim to the throne for himself. But of course his son eventually gets that claim and actually is named by the Witan as the king later on. But he's powerful. He's got money. He's got land. He's got everything you need in 11th century England to be able to wield significant power over whoever the king is.
King Edward also married Godwin's daughter. Then Godwin died, and his massive fortune was passed down to his sons, who all became earls. In particular, this one became the new Earl of Wessex. Harold Godwinson was now King Edward's brother-in-law. He was a close advisor to the king, a brave warrior who had proven himself in battle against the Welsh, and in many ways he was almost like a co-king. Uh-oh, Edward got old and he's on his deathbed. Possibly for religious reasons, or maybe because he wasn't happy about having to marry her, he didn't boink his wife, and as a result has no kids, meaning there's no obvious heir to the throne.
Yeah, he's known as Edward the Confessor, and he's got this really prominent tomb in Westminster Abbey. He's the last great Anglo-Saxon king. Religion may have been a factor. He may have chosen a vow of celibacy. We really don't know for sure what happened, but obviously it throws the whole land into turmoil.
Meaning, I'm gonna be king. He does have a grandnephew. It could be him. No, let's go with me. Just one problem. I mentioned that Edward's mother was a Norman. Edward grew up in Normandy, and he had a lot of Norman friends. The current Duke of Normandy was William the Bastard. Why was he called the Bastard? One day his father was sneaking out of his castle when his advisors said, "Where are you going?" To the tanner's shop? Why? To get a tan. But that was a lie. Firstly, because tanners give you leather, not tans, and secondly, because he was really going to see the tanner's daughter. One thing leads to another, and out comes baby William, born out of wedlock. Thus, an absolute bastard. His father died when William was 7 or 8, and he became the new Duke. He spent most of his childhood narrowly avoiding assassination, which probably turned him into the big balls tough guy he's remembered as today.
So, and we talked about this in the other video too, it's really super unusual for an illegitimate child to be able to inherit, particularly a powerful duchy like Normandy. But this says a lot about William, the kind of person he was, the kind of personal charisma and leadership he had, the influence that he had, and the friends that he had. That he was able to not only get this title even as a child, but hang on to it and then actually conquer England in the process. So, it's impossible not to consider all of those factors as a reason why he was so successful.
In 1051, the town of Alençon tried to rebel against him, and the townspeople beat on dead animal skins as an insult to his commoner mother. William was furious, and he responded by, well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with here. William and Edward were good friends, and Edward allegedly promised that William could have the English throne after him. A decade later, Harold Godwinson even visited William, and pledged an oath to him over holy relics, promising that William could be the next king of England. Although it's possible Harold only did it because William was holding his family hostage. So when William heard that the king was on his deathbed, he said, "Hooray, I'm gonna be king." So now you have two extremely powerful men who both think they're about to become the next king. But wait. This guy is the King of Norway. He spent most of his life as a warrior for hire, fighting for whoever would give him the most gold. You name a place, he probably fought a war there. Poland? Yep. Estonia? Yep. Against pirates in the Mediterranean? Yep. The Holy Lands? Sicily? And Bulgaria? Yep. He got crazy rich off the back of it and was swimming in gold. Then he returned home and became king. One of the previous Norwegian kings had made an agreement with one of England's Viking kings, saying that when that Viking king died, the King of Norway would get the English throne. Hardrada felt that because of this agreement, he was now entitled to the English throne. He was also eager to go on one last big conquest that would turn him into a legend. So when he got word that Edward was on his deathbed, he thought, I'm going to invade England, and then I'm going to be king.
So all three of these guys have a legitimate argument for why the kingdom should be theirs. Now, when Edward the Confessor dies, the Witan does name Harold Godwinson as the king. And so by Anglo-Saxon law, he's the guy. It doesn't matter who he named the heir or things like that. That's the guy that they chose and they've crowned. His, obviously Harold Hardrada, his claim goes back to the previous Danish king, who hasn't been in power for some time now, and was a previous king, and so it's probably a little less of a claim than the others. But boy, and then I think one of Harold Godwinson's brothers actually sides with Harold Hardrada in his claim to the throne.
So now we have 3 extremely powerful men who all think they're about to become the next king of England, and that means somebody's probably about to get hurt. Back in England, Harold Godwinson is watching over the dying King Edward. Suddenly, he comes out with a shocking announcement. Hey, everyone, gather in. That's it. Come closer. Don't be shy. Okay, so I've got bad news. The king is dead. I know, very sad. But good news. He said that I should be the next king, so hooray for me. And, oh yeah, he said that if he once told anyone else they could be king, that he doesn't like them anymore, and they should just stay in Normandy.
And they actually show in the Bayeux Tapestry, which is, the Bayeux Tapestry kind of tells the story of these events, and I can't wait to see it someday. And they actually show Edward the Confessor on his deathbed pointing in the direction of Harold Godwinson, kind of gesturing to him to be the king.
And also he said that no one should ask any further questions. Okay, good talk. Go do whatever it is you do. Usually it took months of preparation to crown a new king, but Harold rushed it, and he had himself crowned the same day King Edward was buried.
Yep.
In Normandy, William's advisors came to him and said, "Hey, Big Willie, bad news. Harold Godwinson is taking the throne." And William was furious, so he sent an envoy to Harold who said, "William says you stole the throne and demands you immediately return it to him." Let me think about that. No. He said no.
Nice.
That bastard. Wait, I thought you were the bastard. Dude. Uncool. William immediately began gathering his armies together and preparing for an invasion of England. Now, killing a king was generally frowned upon in old-timey Europe because they were considered to have been chosen by God himself. So back in Normandy, William had to get God on his side. He needed the Pope's blessing for his conquest, so he went to the Pope and said, "Godwinson made an oath to me over holy relics, and then he usurped the throne. Can I kill him?" Sure, why not?
And it's quite something, too. Again, talking about the illegitimacy here, for the Pope to side with an illegitimately born Duke of Normandy over the chosen by the Witan King of England. This really comes down to money and power and influence and all those sorts of things.
So the Pope gave William his blessing, meaning William now had God on his side. Everything was ready to go. Just one problem. The wind.
All the wind,
It was blowing the wrong way, and William had to wait with his army in Normandy, while Godwinson waited with his army in the south of England. They waited, and waited, and waited, and then William said screw it and sailed for England and got shipwrecked because the wind was blowing the wrong way. So then he decided to keep on waiting. They waited for 2 months and the wind never changed. Eventually Godwinson got bored and also ran out of food for his soldiers, so he sent them all home and he returned to London. The south coast was undefended and all William could do was keep waiting.
Yep.
While the northerly wind kept William in Normandy, it was carrying Hardrada and his Viking army to England. Hardrada landed near the old Viking city of York and defeated a regional army led by the Northern Earls, and York surrendered. When Godwinson heard about this, he must have been pretty upset. He had just disbanded his army, and now he had to gather them all together again and march all the way.
And this is impressive. He just sent the army home, and he's able to not only gather an army back together, but march all the way to the north of England and win a stunning victory at Stamford Bridge.
North. He made the exhausting journey in just 4 days, which is crazy quick.
Yep.
And he caught the Vikings off guard and unprepared for battle. The two armies stood on either side of the River Derwent. Legend says that a berserker Viking single-handedly held the only bridge crossing the river, dodging arrows and fending off attackers, until some English soldiers got under the bridge in a barrel and gave him the old spear in the jewels. This gave the Vikings enough time to form a shield wall, but because they'd been caught off guard, many weren't wearing their chainmail and armor, and the English eventually defeated them, killing Hardrada, and with him, bringing the Viking era in England to an end.
And it wasn't all that close in the end. The Viking army was pretty well wiped out. They had brought hundreds of ships to carry their army and only needed a couple dozen to carry who was left at the end. It was a major victory for Harold Godwinson. And here goes the wind.
Finally. William's fleet of over 700 ships and 14,000 men set sail and landed on the English coast at Pevensey and set up camp near Hastings. And Harold was still all the way in York. His exhausted army had to march all the way south just days after their battle with the Vikings. Harold made it to London and considered just staying there and waiting for William to come to him. But William forced Harold's hand by burning down a bunch of villages. Harold's army set out and met William's on the 14th of October, 1066, and both sides prepared themselves for the Battle of Hastings. The English were on a hill, so they decided to stay there because it was a good defensive position. The Normans approached, and the two sides probably spent a while yelling at each other. William and the Normans had a few tactical advantages over the English. The first were the archers. The Normans sent volley after volley of arrows at the English, who formed a shield wall in defense. Then William sent his infantry up the hill.
Yeah, and the archers weren't all that successful, firing uphill, firing into a shield wall. It didn't have nearly the impact that archers did at other battles, for example, Agincourt.
The English threw anything they had at them, and the Normans couldn't break through the shield wall. Then the Normans' next tactical advantage came into play. William sent his cavalry up the hill, but even they struggled to break through the shield wall defense.
And the cavalry actually goes up the middle. The infantry attacks the sides, the cavalry comes up the middle, and you know the Anglo-Saxons are winning this battle, and all they have to do is hold.
Wave after wave of infantry and cavalry came, and Harold knew all he had to do was let the Normans exhaust themselves and he would win. But then something a bit strange happened. It's possible the Normans incorrectly believed William had been killed. Maybe they lost their will to fight against the shield wall, or maybe it was an intentional deception tactic. But suddenly, the Norman forces turned and ran away from the English.
And he makes a good point there, and most videos on this topic say the same thing. We, even after 1,000 years, even after this battle in this time period, have been studied by everybody because this is such a major event. Nobody knows for sure what happened, why they broke. There's conflicting eyewitness accounts. There's conflicting stories about it. Nobody knows why this happened, but in the end, it's the turning point of the battle.
Believing they had won, the English broke their shield wall and chased down the retreating Normans, who then turned around, encircled the English troops, and cut them down. In the chaotic fighting that followed, Harold Godwinson was killed, the most popular theory being that he took an arrow in the eye. The English were defeated, and William had won. He was no more just a bastard. Now, he was a conqueror.
And again, the arrow in the eye thing comes back to the Bayeux Tapestry, and that's why we think that's what happened. We don't really know for sure if that's how he was killed.
At first, the English nobles were reluctant to make him king, but William burned down a few more villages, and the nobles eventually gave in and offered him the crown. As he was coronated, the local villagers in Westminster let out a cheer of support, but William thought it was a riot, so he burned down the village. William then had to go on a long and costly
Harrowing of the
campaign,
North,
quelling rebellions and burning down villages all over England to force the people into submission.
And William, I mean, this was legitimately devastating, especially in the North. William pretty much scorched earth, burnt the country to the ground, and rebuilt it in his image, so to speak. Completely transformed Anglo-Saxon England into Norman England, built castles all over the place. He really did reform the entire country in his image.
And England went through a massive transformation under its new Norman rule. English nobles were replaced with Normans. They built castles and grand cathedrals, but one of the most interesting changes occurred within the English language. The Normans brought their dialect of French to England, and it merged with Old English in ways we still live with today. First of all, the Normans were obviously the ones in power, so words related to power like government, judge, castle, and crown come from the Normans. Words that are considered posher or more refined are usually the Norman ones. At first, the Anglo-Saxons probably weren't that friendly to the Normans, while the Normans likely weren't that amiable towards the Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah, and the French language becomes the language of the English court. The English government, the English royalty. For the next nearly, probably 350 years or so, it's only like around 1400 or so, just before the Wars of the Roses, that English starts to dominate government.
An Anglo-Saxon might come into a room, but a Norman would enter into a chamber. An Anglo-Saxon might buy themselves a shirt, while a Norman would purchase a blouse. And while that filthy peasant's new shirt may be fair, the Norman blouse is absolutely beautiful. The Normans actually considered some Anglo-Saxon words so crude that I can't even say them on YouTube. But there's more. Ask an Anglo-Saxon what job he does, and he might respond with some low-level trade, such as a baker, a miller, or a shoemaker. But a Norman has a skilled trade, like a painter, a tailor, or a merchant. The Anglo-Saxon farmers working in the fields owned many cows, pigs, and sheep, but once they were served up in a Norman banquet, they became beef, pork, and mutton. And written English changed too. Since many Anglo-Saxons couldn't write, the written language was romanticized. Your annoying friend that says Cool Whip might just be speaking an Old English dialect, as the Anglo-Saxons originally wrote it when, where, and what, but the Normans swapped the W and H around, and the long English A vowel sounded more like an O to the Normans, so you can thank them that you live in a home, not a ham. Hey, fun fact about William, the man couldn't read or write, not in French, not in English, not in anything. Well, what if I told you there was a place where you could learn French, English, even Japanese if you wanted? And not just that, pick up a musical instrument, learn to...
So he's going to talk about Skillshare there, and Skillshare is great. I use it myself. Check out his video and see the entire ad for yourself. But that was really well done. In fact, I think while the video we watched the other day from Baz Battles, I think does a great job of showing us the tactical part of the battle itself. I think this one actually does a much better job of giving the background and the why to it. How and why everything happens. So great stuff. Really impressed by that one. I love all of Oversimplified stuff. It's entertaining, but it's also fairly accurate most of the time. So good stuff. I thank you guys for putting me onto that one. Make sure to check out the original video if you've never seen it, and hit like on that one as well as this one. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.